A millionaire wanted to visit his construction project one last time, as his vision was fading day by day due to a debilitating illness. But then, two poor homeless children unexpectedly appearing there would completely alter his life. Dr. Miller set the results sheet down on the glossy wooden table. He looked directly at Arthur Sterling, the man seated across from him in a rigid posture, as though bracing for a high-stakes multi-million-dollar deal. "Arthur, I'll get right to the point. The diagnosis has not changed. The degenerative sight condition is progressing faster than anticipated. You need to accept this truth." Arthur did not blink. He stared at the hem of the doctor's white coat where blurry smudges like oil, slicks on water had begun to appear. "Accept it. I've poured millions of dollars into medical research only to hear you tell me to make peace with the dark. Money cannot change genetic structure, Arthur. You have a few months, maybe weeks, before your world is reduced to mere shades of gray. Start putting your affairs in order." Arthur sprang to his feet, pushing his chair back with a dry, grating screech across the floor. He retrieved the medical report, tucked it into his vest pocket without another look. "I've spent my entire life preparing to look down from the summit, Miller. I will not learn to navigate like a blind person while my tower remains unfinished." Arthur stepped out of the clinic. Outside, Seattle greeted him with a sudden thunderstorm. He got into the driver's seat of his sports car, his hands tight on the steering wheel. The lights of the dashboard began to blur in his eyes. Arthur pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward through the heavy rain, leaving the glittering city lights behind. He was not headed for his extravagant mansion. He sped toward the outskirts where the spire stood towering, a massive metal skeleton against the black sky. The spire, that tower, was Arthur's pride, his glory. And now it was his greatest defeat. The project was stalled due to legal and financial disputes. He stopped the car right in front of the main entrance and stepped out into the tempest. Arthur carried a single flashlight, which he used to push open the heavy metal door. The thunder rumbling overhead drowned out his labored breathing. Inside the building, the air was cold and thick with the smell of cured concrete. Arthur switched on the flashlight. The weak beam swept across the rough columns. He moved slowly. His eyes protested with sharp pains whenever he tried to focus on a spot. "You constructed this place to look out over the world, Arthur. Now you can't even clearly make out the steps at your feet." He muttered to himself, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. Arthur took the emergency stairwell up to the penthouse floor. Each step was an ordeal for his deteriorating sight. Reaching the 40th floor, he stopped to catch his breath. The flashlight beam wavered on the floor. Suddenly, the light beam settled on a corner of the room. An empty bag of cookies lay tossed aside. Beside it, several cardboard sheets were neatly stacked, forming a makeshift bed. Arthur froze. A burst of fury ignited in his chest. "Who is here? Come out now!" He yelled, his voice striking the concrete walls and echoing back. Arthur swept the flashlight beam around. A small shadow darted past the large central column. He immediately rushed after it. "I know you're hiding. This is my property. No one is permitted here." In his anger, Arthur forgot his blurring vision. He ran toward the corner where the shadow had disappeared. Suddenly, his foot connected with a hard object. It was a small wooden toy automobile. The trip caused Arthur to lose his balance. He stumbled forward. The flashlight flew from his hand, spinning across the floor, creating continuous sweeping beams of light like a stage spotlight. The mechanical sound of the building's infrastructure whistled in the storm wind through the gaps in the doors, forming a terrifying howl. Arthur stood up, gripping the wall. A few feet away, in the scattered light from the flashlight on the floor, he saw two small figures. A girl held tightly to the hand of a smaller boy. They looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Don't approach us!" The girl shouted, her voice trembling but resolute. Sam, the younger boy, huddled behind his sister. Arthur tried to compose himself to clearly see the children's faces, but everything was just gray, indistinct blocks. "You little trespassers! What gives you the right to be here? Get out of here this instant." Arthur took one step forward, but the two children were faster. Maya grabbed Sam's hand and both darted toward the service rooms at the end of the penthouse hallway. Their tiny footsteps pattering on the concrete floor sounded like a frenzied heartbeat in Arthur's chest. "Stop right there!" Arthur exerted himself and ran after them. This intrusion was the final straw for a man who felt he was losing everything. He saw the two shadows rush into the large marble-tiled bathroom, the only area with completed furnishings intended as a show model. Arthur lunged forward, his arm outstretched, his fingers touching the cold oak surface of the door. The moment he was about to force it open, a sound rang out. A metallic click from the inside confirmed the lock had been set. Arthur twisted the doorknob repeatedly, but it wouldn't budge. Inside, the children's ragged breathing mingled with hushed, fearful whispers. Arthur pressed his forehead against the door, his breath coming in gasps. Arthur Sterling stood before the oak door, his panting breath mingling with the thunder from outside. He could no longer clearly see the wood grain, only a looming mass of gray-brown separating him from the intruders. His hands, usually only familiar with signing billion-dollar contracts, were now tightly clenched veins visibly bulging. Arthur hammered his fist against the door. The impact sent a sharp pain through his shoulder, but the fury within him was greater. "Come out now! How long do you think you can hide in there? This is my property, my asset." The hammering echoed in the empty penthouse space, reverberating like hammer blows into the mind of the man who was slowly losing his sight. Arthur pressed his face against the cold wood, his blurring eyes searching for a gap. "I'm giving you 30 seconds. If you don't open the door, I will not be lenient. Do you think you can seize this place?" Inside the bathroom, Maya leaned her entire small weight against the door. She could feel every tremor from Arthur's striking blows transmitted through the oak. Maya reached back and tightly covered Sam's mouth. Sam was huddled against his sister, his eyes wide fixed on the frantically turning doorknob. The boy's hot tears soaked Maya's palm. "Don't be scared, Sam. I'm here," Maya whispered, even as her own feet were shaking on the cool marble floor. Sam broke free from his sister's embrace. He fumbled in his worn backpack, his small fingers trembling as he pulled out a cell phone with a few cracks on the screen. Sam dialed 911. The dry, prolonged tone rang out in the cramped space. The boy choked back a sob as he heard the voice on the other end. 911, what is your emergency?" Sam cried out into the handset, his voice frayed with sheer panic. He no longer cared if the man outside could hear him. "Ma'am, help us. There's a huge man trying to break down the door. He's enormous. He wants to take us away. He's striking the door so hard." Arthur suddenly stopped. He pressed his ear to the narrow gap in the door. Sam's voice slipped out fragile, yet cutting deeply into his pride. He heard the words, "huge man," and "take us away." Arthur paused. His raised arm fell limply to his side. "Bring the police here. Lots of police. He's almost in. I'm so scared." Arthur retreated one step, then two. His prior aggression dissipated instantly. He looked at his hands, and though he could only see blurry outlines, he felt the trembling. He realized he had spent 10 minutes threatening two defenseless children while he himself was utterly powerless against his own destiny. "Listen to me. I'm not a huge man. I'm the owner of this building." Arthur tried to lower his voice. He aimed for a gentle tone, but his throat was parched. He reached out and touched the door this time, not to strike it, but as a silent apology. "I won't harm you. I just want to know why you are here. Open the door, and we can speak like civilized people. All right?" Inside, Sam's crying did not subside. The boy did not hear Arthur's words, or his mind had already labeled the person beyond the door as a deadly danger. "Dad, Mom, save us! The brute is coming in!" Sam wailed for his parents. Those cries felt like a dagger to Maya. She hugged her brother and they both collapsed onto the floor. Maya looked at her reflection, seeing her ashen face in the dim light. She clutched Sam's shoulder, trying to keep him from passing out from fright. "Calm down, Sam. The police are on their way. They will help us." Arthur stood outside in the hallway, leaning against the rough concrete wall. He felt a heavy stone pressing down on his chest. He remembered the day he lost his own parents, the day he, too, hid in a dark corner, wishing for someone to protect him. "I apologize. I didn't realize you were so scared. I'm backing away, see, I'm moving far away now." Arthur fumbled in the air, trying to find his way toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. His eyes ached, and the patches of gray were beginning to completely dominate his vision. He tripped over the wooden toy automobile, once more, nearly tumbling over. This confounded vision. He cursed under his breath, helplessness engulfing his mind. Just as Arthur was fumbling for support, streaks of blue and red light began sweeping across the room. The light was so strong that it cut through the haze in Arthur's eyes, splashing onto the concrete columns and unpainted walls. A loud siren wailed through the tower, cutting through the storm. Arthur stood still. He saw the outlines of police vehicles stopped below their lights, illuminating the area brilliantly. "They've arrived," Arthur whispered. He turned back toward the tightly locked bathroom door. He knew that in just a few minutes, his life and the lives of these two children would turn in a direction no one could have foreseen. "Do you hear that the police are here? You are safe now." Arthur sank down to sit on the floor, his hands resting limply between his legs. He waited. He no longer wanted to send them away. He just wanted this night to end, wanted the darkness in his eyes not to encroach any further. Downstairs, the sound of the main door being forced open rang out. The heavy footsteps of law enforcement began ascending the stairwell. Arthur closed his eyes, accepting the light show of blue and red dancing across his face. The bathroom door remained silent, holding the fear of the two children and the secret of a marble room awaiting discovery. A commanding voice from a loudspeaker below ripped through the night. "Police requesting everyone inside the building to maintain their position." Arthur Sterling managed a thin, wry smile. He never thought his reputation would be linked to a 911 call from a 6-year-old child. Everything was just beginning. His isolation had just collided with the isolation of two children, and amidst the Seattle tempest, a strange connection was forming from the very fragments of fear. Arthur felt the footsteps drawing very near the 40th floor. The police flashlight swept intensely across Arthur's pale face. He stood motionless, his hands raised, feeling the chill of the service sidearms aimed in his direction. The commanding officer approached firmly, positioning Arthur against the marble wall. "Stay put, Mr. Sterling. I need you to explain your presence here, along with the two distressed children." Arthur took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady even as his eyes ached under the intense light. "My wallet and ID are in my inner jacket pocket. I am the legal owner of this building. I came here to inspect my private asset." The officer reached into Arthur's pocket and pulled out the expensive leather wallet. He flipped open the ID card, shined the flashlight on it, then looked back at Arthur's face. The tension in the penthouse room eased slightly. The sidearms were lowered gradually. "Mr. Sterling, Arthur Sterling. The one in the news this morning. That would be me. I don't believe standing inside my own property constitutes a crime. We received a call reporting a brute attacking children. You don't look like a brute, sir, but those children don't seem to agree." At the same time, Officer Patino approached the bathroom door. She knocked gently on the partially cracked oak wood. "You're safe now. This is the police. Come on out, no one is going to harm you anymore." The door opened slowly. Maya stepped out first, her hands gripping the hem of Sam's worn-out shirt. Sam pressed his face into his sister's back, his eyes swollen from crying, staring intently at Arthur with loathing. Maya stood guard in front of her brother, her gaze like a small animal ready to defend its territory. "He was trying to get his hands on us. He was striking the door like he wanted to shatter it." Maya pointed at Arthur. The commanding officer looked at the scattered debris, the wooden toy automobile on the floor, and then back at Arthur. "Mr. Sterling, what were your intentions regarding the children?" "I didn't know they were here. I walked in and found strangers. I merely wanted to secure my property. I had no idea they were two children until they ran into the bathroom." Arthur spoke, his voice strained with exhaustion. He wanted to explain that he too was afraid that the darkness was consuming him, but the pride of a tycoon would not allow him to show weakness in front of strangers. Officer Patino knelt down to eye level with Maya. She took a packet of candy from her pocket and offered it to Sam, but the boy shook his head, burrowing deeper behind his sister. "What's your name? Why are you in an abandoned construction site in the middle of a storm?" "I'm Maya. This is Sam. We didn't have anywhere to go. Our parents passed away 6 months ago. They want to separate us. They said Sam is too young and needs to go to a different foster home, and I have to go to a place for older children. I can't let them take Sam away." Maya spoke, her voice painfully mature. Arthur leaned back against the wall, listening to every word. A chilling feeling spread through his chest. He recalled the day he turned 10, the day people in uniform walked into his house and led his little sister away in a different direction. He screamed until he was hoarse, but no one stopped. The commanding officer sighed, then took out his communication device. "I understand, but the law is the law, Maya. You can't live hidden away in this concrete mess. We're going to take you to the station, and then Child Protective Services will take over." "No, please, officer. You can take me anywhere, but don't let them separate Sam. I can work, I can care for my brother. Don't make us be apart." Maya suddenly fell to her knees on the cold stone floor. She clutched the officer's pant leg, her small hands shaking uncontrollably. Seeing his sister kneel, Sam cried out, hugging Maya's neck. The scene made the already cold penthouse room even more suffocating with despair. "Get up, little one. We are just following protocol." The officer was about to help Maya stand up, but at that moment, a violent tremor ran from the ground to the top of the tower. The entire concrete structure shook. A loud impact came from the hillside behind the building. The police communication device crackled and rapid reports began to stream in. "Boss, there's a major landslide. An old-growth pine tree to the north just toppled, completely severing the area's power lines. The only road leading up the hill has been entirely buried by mud and boulders." The commanding officer rushed to the window, shining his flashlight downwards. The light only reached a sheet of white rain and the debris of the paved road far below. "Confound it, we are cut off. What did the rescue team report?" "They said the rain is too heavy. Excavators cannot access the area tonight. They won't start clearing until the earliest light of dawn. We'll have to stay put, boss." Officer Patino looked at Arthur, then at the two children. The power in the building depended on the city grid. Now everything was plunged into complete darkness, except for the flickering flashlights. "Mr. Sterling, it seems you will have some uninvited guests for the rest of the night." Arthur remained silent. His eyes were blurred. He only saw vague shadows moving in front of him. He heard the muffled sobbing of Maya and Sam on the floor. A decision sparked in his mind, quick and decisive, like closing a billion-dollar deal. The officer was about to lead Maya to a safer area on a lower floor, but Arthur stepped forward. He walked slowly, his hand touching the wall to orient himself, and then positioned himself directly between the officer and the two children. "Where do you intend to take them in this darkness?" "Down to the ground floor. Find a sheltered spot to wait until morning, Mr. Sterling." "That won't be necessary. This penthouse has enough emergency supplies and blankets. You have your duty, but these two children, let them stay here with me." "What are you saying? You were just trying to throw them out into the storm?" Arthur turned his face toward Maya, though he couldn't clearly see her expression. He sensed the absolute panic emanating from the small being. "I've changed my mind. It's safer here. I will take responsibility for their protection until the road is cleared." Maya looked up at Arthur. In the faint yellow light of the flashlight on the floor, the tycoon's face no longer resembled a brute. He stood there tall and steady, like a wall separating her from the world that wanted to tear her family apart. Sam stopped crying. He looked up at the man who had just yelled at him, then looked at Maya. Arthur said nothing more. He just stood still, his hands limply at his sides, but his broad shoulders open as if embracing a small space for the two children. The commanding officer looked at his partner, then at Arthur. He clicked his tongue and tucked his communication device into its holster. "All right, but if anything happens, you will have to answer to the court." The police withdrew to attempt to find an alternate route, leaving 3 people in the vast room. Arthur felt the warmth of Sam's breath near his feet. He knew this would be the longest night of his life, not because of the storm, but because of the broken souls taking refuge in this marble citadel. Arthur suddenly heard tiny footsteps approaching him. Sam tugged at the hem of his vest, his voice still trembling. "Sir, you really won't let them take my sister away?" Arthur bowed his head toward the dark patch where Sam's voice came from. He felt a strange compulsion rising from the depths of his heart. "As long as you are in this building, no one can take anyone away." Compassion sometimes germinates in the most perilous moments. Do you think Arthur's decision to keep the 2 children was out of responsibility, or because he saw his own past reflected in them? Please leave your thoughts below. And now, Let us continue the story. The footsteps of the police officers faded down the stairwell, giving way to the incessant rain striking the tempered glass surrounding the penthouse. The 40th floor fell into an uncanny silence. The blue and red lights from the bottom of the hill no longer reached here. Arthur Sterling sat down on the floor, his back resting against the gray concrete column. He closed his eyes tightly, trying to suppress the dull ache running along his optic nerves. In the opposite corner, Maya and Sam still huddled together. Maya held her younger brother tightly, her eyes never leaving the motionless man. She maintained a safe distance. The apprehension was still evident in the way she tensed up whenever Arthur moved slightly. Sam looked at his sister, then across at Arthur. He released Maya's hand and slowly crawled toward the man with his eyes closed. He placed the stale crust of bread remaining in his pocket into Arthur's trembling palm. "Here, sir, eat this. It helps when you feel less pain." Arthur opened his eyes. He couldn't clearly see Sam's face, only a small blurry shadow standing right next to him. The warmth from the child's small hand touching his skin stunned Arthur. In his world, sharing always came with contract stipulations. The lavish parties and handshakes reeking of money had never offered the sincere feeling of this dry piece of bread. "I'm not hungry. Keep it for your sister." "Please take it, sir. This bread is very dry, but if you chew it well, it tastes sweet. When Sam is sad, Sam always eats bread." Arthur gently took the crust. He felt a profound emotion spreading through his core. This child whom he had just chased away and who called him a brute was now the only one concerned about his pain. "Why are you doing this? I was going to throw you out into the rain." "Because you're frowning just like Sam when he falls down. My mom said everyone hurts sometimes, and when that happens, you need someone nearby." Maya slowly approached now. She was still wary but less hostile. She took an old rag from her pocket, dampened it with water from a plastic bottle, and meticulously wiped the rain streaks from her brother's hair. "Sam is right. You don't have to pretend to be strong in this empty building." Arthur switched on his flashlight. The weak beam swept across the surrounding walls. He froze when he saw a series of chalk drawings on the rough concrete. There was a picture of a radiant house under the sun, a man and a woman holding hands with two children. The drawings were crude but full of warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, lifeless steel and concrete surrounding them. "Did you draw these?" "Yes. When Sam is afraid of the dark, I tell him to draw the sun on the wall. It makes us feel warmer." Arthur looked at the drawings, then at Maya. The kindness and maturity of the 13-year-old girl suddenly stung his heart. He had spent half his life building colossal structures, calling them the pride of the city, but he had never breathed life into them. To him, this was a concrete corpse, but to these two children, this was the final stronghold protecting their family bond. "I was too callous to call this place a heap of rubble. It turns out you were the ones who brought it to life. Why did you build this tower, sir, to sell it for money?" "I used to think so, Maya. I thought money could buy respect and power, but now I can't even clearly see the flashlight in my own hand." "Don't worry, sir. I can be your eyes. I'll tell you about the drawings on the wall and about the rain outside." The initial animosity was completely gone. Among the three people isolated by the elements, an invisible connection began to form. Arthur felt lighter. For the first time in years, he felt he was not alone in his own domain. But that moment of peace was short-lived. Arthur suddenly clutched his head. A searing pain erupted from the base of his eyes, feeling like thousands of fine, sharp points piercing his sight. He collapsed onto the floor, the flashlight flying far away, spinning and creating chaotic streaks of light. "Mr. Arthur, what's wrong?" Sam's cry rang out in a panic. Arthur tried to open his eyes, but everything before him was no longer just patches of gray blur. A thick, cold darkness began to completely consume his vision. He fumbled his hands in the air, his breathing ragged with extreme terror. I can't see anything anymore. Maya, Sam, where are you?" Arthur Sterling lay huddled on the concrete floor, his strong hands clutching the small patch of synthetic turf the children had laid down. The pain from his eyes pulsed with every heartbeat, scorching his optic nerves. His entire magnificent world vanished, replaced by a thick, cold, gray haze. Arthur struggled to open his eyes, but only saw blurry dark patches dancing. Maya let go of Sam and rushed to Arthur's side. Her small hands searched quickly through his jacket pockets. "Where's that vial? I saw you drop it earlier." "Right pocket, the blue plastic vial," Arthur whispered, sweat pouring down his face, even though the air in the penthouse was very cold. Maya found the medicine under a wooden chair. She knelt down and placed Arthur's head on her lap. "I found it. I'm going to administer it now. You have to hold still. Just 2 drops. Don't let the tip touch the eye." Maya held Arthur's eyelid with firm fingers. She did not tremble. The drops of cool liquid fell, soothing the burning in Arthur's eye sockets. Sam stood beside them, clutching his sister's shirt, his eyes wide with fear. "Sister Maya, is he going to be all right?" "He'll be fine, Sam. Sit down here with me." Maya pulled Sam to sit on the floor beside Arthur. To dispel the heavy atmosphere and reassure her brother, she began to speak, her voice even as if telling an old story. "Sam, do you remember the house with the white fence they took us to last month? The woman there was holding a thick file. She said you were too young to stay with a teenager like me. She wanted to send you to a family in the South and me to a boarding center in the East. They treated us like numbers on paper." Sam nodded, burying his face in his sister's shoulder. Maya continued, her eyes fixed on the dark void ahead. "They said it was procedure, that it was for our future. But they didn't understand that I'm the only one who knows how much you fear the dark. I'm the only one who knows you prefer stale bread to sweet cakes. That's why I chose to take you away. We've traversed 3 states, slept under overpasses and in empty rail cars. We chose this tower because it's tall and because it's unfinished. No one comes to check a residency list every day." Arthur lay still, listening to the words of the 13-year-old girl. The pain in his eyes began to subside, but the darkness remained. He felt a strange sense of empathy. Arthur was a tycoon, Maya was a runaway, but both were fighting a world that constantly sought to discard them. Arthur was cast aside by disease, and the 2 children were discarded by the bureaucracy of the welfare system. "I've also spent my whole life building walls, Maya. I thought they would protect me from harm, but it turns out they only made me more isolated. I stood at the top of this city without a single person to call family. Now you have us. Even if you can't see, I won't abandon you." Arthur struggled to sit up. His arms fumbled for support. Maya quickly took his elbow, helping him to his feet. Arthur's vision was still a hazy curtain. He was completely reliant on the girl's guidance. "We need to move further inside. The utility shaft area behind the model kitchen will be safer. There are thick steel bulkheads there." Maya led Arthur step by step. Sam walked behind, holding the hem of Arthur's jacket so as not to get lost. Just as they had walked a few feet, a metallic sound echoed from the emergency stairwell. This was followed by heavy footsteps moving secretly but decisively. Arthur stopped abruptly. His ears became more sensitive as his eyes ceased to function. He heard the ragged breathing of multiple people. "Maya, get down, someone is coming up." The 3 lowered their center of gravity, concealing themselves behind an unfinished stone bar counter. Arthur crawled low to the floor, his hand accidentally touching a hard, cold metal object. It was the communication device the police officer had accidentally dropped earlier. He pressed it to his ear, his hand gently turning the volume down to the lowest setting. The static of the radio frequency rang out, then a voice so familiar, it sent a shiver down Arthur's spine. "Listen up, the police are stuck at the base of the hill because of the landslide. We have at least 2 hours before the rescue team clears the road. Demolish the water pipe system on the 38th floor. Cut the signal cables too. When this building looks like a demolished ruin, the board will have to sign it over to me for half the price." The triumphant laughter of Gavin, his unscrupulous business rival, came through the communication device. Arthur tightened his grip on the device, his face set in stone with indignation. Gavin didn't just want to take over the company, he was intent on destroying Arthur's life's work this very night in the storm. Arthur felt Maya trembling beside him. He turned his head toward the girl, though he only saw a gray blur. "Gavin is right below us. He brought people here to sabotage this place." "Sir, are there many of them? Will they find us?" Sam whispered, his voice shaking with fear. Arthur did not answer immediately. He listened to the sound of metal cutters beginning to operate from the floor below. The vibration of the building transmitted through his palm. I won't let him lay a hand on you, but Maya, I need you to be my eyes right now. Are you brave enough to take on this brute with me? Maya clutched Arthur's hand. She looked toward the door leading to the hallway, where unfamiliar flashlight beams began to sweep through the gap. I'm ready. Tell me what to watch for, and I'll watch it. Arthur nodded. He began to recall the layout of the central electrical control system on the 40th floor. Just then, the emergency exit door burst open with a loud impact, and an intense flashlight beam shone directly onto their hiding spot. Found them, someone's hiding behind the bar. The shout of one of the workers rang out, followed by heavy footsteps rushing toward them. Arthur quickly pulled Maya and Sam backward into the shadows as the intense beam of light was drawing very near. Arthur held the communication device tightly to his ear. The radio static crackled, but Gavin's voice was perfectly clear. He was ordering the crew below to destroy the entire core electrical system and water lines on the 38th floor. Arthur clenched his fists. He understood his rival's every move. Gavin didn't want to acquire the company through a fair deal. He wanted to turn the Spire into a heap of wreckage to force a low buyout price by morning. Arthur felt the vibration transmitted through the concrete floor. The dry, clanging sounds of metal collision rang out incessantly from the lower floors. The crew was getting closer. Maya, I can't see clearly anymore. You have to be my eyes. Look through that door gap. How many flashlight beams are moving? I see 3 beams, sir. They are standing at the stairwell entrance. They're carrying many heavy bags. He intends to demolish my life's work in a single night of this tempest. Maya, I cannot let this building fall like this, but right now, your safety is the most important thing. We're not scared, but Sam is really trembling. Sir, will they find us? Listen to me. I know every corner of this place like the back of my hand. Behind the model kitchen, there's a narrow utility shaft that leads straight down to the basement. It's the sole egress that Gavin is unaware of. Arthur began to recall the blueprint he had studied thousands of times. He instructed Maya and Sam to gather only the absolute necessities. Maya quickly stuffed the remaining water bottle and bread into the backpack. Sam clutched the wooden automobile tightly, his eyes wide, watching his sister's every move. Maya leads Sam along the left wall. Count 10 steps and you'll find a round metal plate on the floor. Don't make any noise. The 3 moved silently in the dark. Arthur walked in the middle, his hands touching the rough walls for orientation. He felt every brick, every concrete slab groaning under the intrusion of the saboteurs. Arthur was a man who only believed in numbers and profit, but at this moment, he felt he was protecting something far more valuable than money. My mother once said that people who cause others harm are often the loneliest. Do you think that Gavin is lonely? He's not lonely, Maya. He's just consumed by greed. Greed blinds a person more than my condition does right now. Suddenly, an intense tremor shook the floor. Gavin and his crew had begun attempting to breach the penthouse's rolling shutters. Dust from the ceiling rained down, covering Sam's hair. Their only escape was threatened by the crumbling construction materials. Arthur quickly pulled Maya and Sam against the corner of the wall. He used his large body as a shield, protecting the 2 small beings from the falling debris. The pain in his eyes flared up again, but Arthur clenched his teeth. He could not collapse now. Don't let go of my hand, sir. There's too much dust. I can't see the path. Sam, close your eyes. I'm right here. Maya, take hold of my shoulder. We cannot retreat now. The sound of sledgehammers striking the penthouse door rang out repeatedly. Gavin seemed to have lost patience. He wanted to finish the job quickly before the police could return. Arthur, I know you're in there. How long will you hide behind those children to shield your failure? Come out and sign this agreement and I'll let you go to the hospital. Gavin's voice echoed throughout the hallway. Arthur did not respond. He signaled for Maya to lead Sam deep into the marble bathroom. That was the most strongly reinforced area of the 40th floor with a steel core. The 3 had just managed to close the bathroom door when the main penthouse door was breached. The heavy footsteps poured into the living area. Arthur sensed the cold air and the smell of sweat from the crew searching everywhere. Boss, the bathroom is locked. The old man must be hiding in there. The marble bathroom door suddenly rattled violently. A large pry bar impacted the door seam, creating a terrifying screech of metal. Maya hugged Sam tightly in the dry bathtub. Sam was no longer crying. He stared intently at the wooden door that was slowly cracking. The flashlight beams from outside began to pierce through the newly formed gaps in the door. The faint light swept across Arthur's pale face. He stood opposite the door, his hands clenched as if his own strength could keep this last stronghold from falling. "I'm ready, Mr. Arthur. I won't let them take Sam." "Maya, you're doing wonderfully. Hold your brother tight. I will not let anyone pass this doorway." The sound of the oak wood splintering grew louder. A piece of wood fell to the floor, revealing the grim face of a worker looking inside. He smirked, showing his yellowed teeth. "Found you open up before I have to use more extreme measures." Arthur Sterling took a deep breath. Though his eyes could not see, he sensed the exact position of his enemy. His hand touched a heavy utility object on the marble counter, ready for a situation he never imagined he would face in his business life. The bathroom door rattled once more, and this time, half the latch mechanism flew onto the floor. When darkness envelops and material values are threatened, the only thing that holds firm is the sincerity between people. But how will they get out of danger? Let's continue. The oak door could not withstand the pressure for another second. The cold steel pry bar punctured the wood jutting into the bathroom. Sam buried his face deep in his sister's embrace as Maya backed up against the marble tub. Arthur stood guard in front, his hands fumbling in the air, but his mind was frantically searching through every blueprint of this tower. "Maya, listen to me. In the right corner of the tub, there's a marble panel that hasn't been fixed with adhesive. Push it hard to the left now." Maya released Sam. She used all her strength to push the stone panel. A dark gap appeared, leading straight into the maintenance ventilation shaft. Arthur lifted Sam onto his shoulder, his arms strong despite his body shaking from the eye pain. "Hold my hand. We have to get in there before they shatter this door." Maya tightly gripped the hem of Arthur's vest, guiding him into the darkness of the ductwork. Just as the marble panel was pulled back into place, the sound of the bathroom door collapsing onto the floor rang out. Gavin's flashlight beams swept across the empty room. The three moved silently like phantoms inside the cramped duct system. Arthur felt the frantic beat of Sam's heart on his shoulder. "Mr. Arthur, I can't see anything. It's too dark in here." "Don't be scared, Sam. I can't see either, but I know this place by heart." "Maya, what do you see ahead of us?" "There are 3 beams of light sweeping the main hallway beneath us, sir. They're moving toward the elevator shaft." Arthur calculated the pace of the crew's footsteps overhead. He knew that if they continued to move like this, they would eventually be heard. "Maya, grab that heavy utility tool on the floor here. Launch it with force down the elevator shaft behind us." Maya complied. A heavy object dropped, creating a prolonged, echoing impact down the deep cavity. Immediately, the heavy footsteps of the saboteurs changed direction, rushing toward the opposite side. "They're gone, sir. You're so clever." "We're not safe yet. Maya, guide me across these steel beams. Be careful. The rainwater leaking makes them very slick." The 3 crawled across the cold metal beams. Arthur used his ears and memory to determine their position. He knew he was in the building's structural core. A narrow access panel appeared, the latch positioned on the far side of a gap that Arthur's body could never maneuver through. "I can't get through here. Sam, can you crawl through that gap and pull the red metal lever?" Sam looked at Maya. She nodded in encouragement. The 6-year-old took a deep breath, released his grip on Arthur's neck, and crawled into the narrow opening. Maya held her breath, watching him. Small Sam squeezed between the cables, his tiny hands clutching the iron latch and pulling hard. The metallic click of the door opening rang out. "I did it. See how clever I am." "You are the hero of tonight, Sam. Maya, now lead me to the central electrical panel area on the 35th floor. I need you to do something." Arthur guided Maya step by step. Under his direction, the girl constantly updated the location of Gavin's team through the ventilation gaps. They narrowly escaped the crew's perimeter on the 35th floor, with the men only a thin wall away. Arthur felt the heat from their high-powered flashlights. "Maya, do you see the metal box with the lightning symbol? Open it up and find the largest lever." "I see it. But if I cut the power, we won't be able to see the way either." "It doesn't matter. I'm already in the dark. Now I want them to experience that feeling too. They are the truly blind ones without artificial light. Cut the power." Maya used both hands to pull the emergency power switch. The entire tower was plunged into pitch darkness. The crew's curses rang out chaotically in the hallway, as their flashlights were insufficient to counter the stillness of the night. The three took advantage of the chaos to move back toward the penthouse floor via the maintenance stairwell. The smooth coordination between the sightless man's intellect and the children's acuity had turned the tower into an inescapable labyrinth for the intruders. Arthur felt a strange sense of pride. He had never trusted anyone as completely as he trusted Maya and Sam tonight. "Mr. Arthur, I see the path to the balcony. The lightning flashes outside are helping me see the way out." Maya led Arthur and Sam back up to the 40th floor. She hoped to reach the balcony to use the flashlight to signal the rescue forces below the hill. Arthur was breathing heavily, his eyes throbbing, but he forced himself to keep going. Just as they reached the emergency exit door to step out onto the windswept balcony, a large, dark shadow abruptly blocked the doorway. Maya froze. Sam huddled behind Arthur. A powerful flashlight suddenly clicked on, shining directly into Arthur's blurring eyes. "Where do you think you're going, Arthur?" Gavin's voice rang out cold and filled with menace. Arthur stumbled backward, his hand instinctively rising to shield his eyes, but all he saw was a blinding whiteout. He lost his orientation, his feet backing precariously toward the edge of the balcony without a safety railing. The Seattle tempest raged behind them, ready to consume anyone who lost their footing. "Don't harm him! The police are coming!" Maya screamed, standing in front of Arthur, but Gavin only sneered. He took a long stride toward them, the pry bar in his hand dragging across the concrete floor, creating terrifying noises. Arthur sensed the cold breath of danger very close, and this time he had no blueprint that could save them from this direct confrontation. Maya grabbed Arthur's arm just as he stumbled back toward the balcony ledge. She pulled him hard to the left, squeezing through the narrow aperture, leading into a small utility closet used for paints and construction materials. Gavin missed his stride. His flashlight beam swept across the empty concrete wall where Arthur had just stood. Maya quickly closed the thick wooden door, threw the iron latch, and pulled a heavy steel shelving unit to block the entrance. Inside the closet, the cramped space was just enough for the three to huddle amidst the paint cans and plastic tarps. The sound of the storm still hammered the metal roof above, but inside, the silence was even heavier. Arthur sat down on the floor, his broad shoulders slumped. He rested his head on his knees, his breathing heavy and fragmented. "Maya, Sam, I apologize." Arthur spoke, his voice hoarse. Sam crawled closer, resting his head on Arthur's shoulder. The boy was no longer crying. He just listened silently to the frantic beat of the man he once called a brute. Arthur gently reached out his trembling hand and touched Sam's head. "Don't say that, sir. You helped us escape that bad man." Maya sat opposite, watching Arthur in the faint light filtering through a tiny ventilation gap above. She saw a completely different man. No longer the powerful tycoon who managed a colossal real estate empire. In front of her was just a man confronting the complete dissolution of his inner world. "Sam is right. You don't owe us an apology." "Yes, I do, Maya. I owe you too, and I owe myself. I spent 15 years building this tower. I wanted it to be the tallest, most magnificent structure in Seattle. I wanted to stand on this summit and look down upon everyone. I once thought if I were richer, more powerful, I would never feel the same fear I felt the day I lost my parents." Arthur managed a thin, wry smile. He raised his hand and touched his blurring eyes. "I used ruthlessness to achieve everything. I fired longtime employees just because their work slowed down slightly. I swallowed up smaller rivals without a second thought. I built the spire with all my selfishness. I saw it as my legacy, my citadel. But look at me now, I'm trapped in this very fortress blind, and without a single true friend to call for help." Maya listened in silence. She understood that feeling. She and Sam had also stood amidst the crowds on the streets where thousands walked by, but no one truly saw them. The loneliness of a tycoon and the loneliness of two homeless children turned out to share the same flavor. "You know, Mr. Arthur, sometimes not being able to see helps you see things more clearly." Maya stood up, walking closer to the ventilation opening. She looked out at the night sky being torn apart by the storm. "Do you want to know what it looks like out there?" "Let me tell you the colors of this night." Arthur raised his head. He listened intently to Maya's clear voice. The sky is a deep blue, but not the color of the sea. It's the color of crushed blueberries underfoot. The clouds are ash gray, rolling like giant tangled piles of yarn. And the lightning? Mr. Arthur. It's not just white light, it's silvery purple, like broken crystal necklaces scattered across the dark. Every time the lightning flashes, I see the raindrops looking like tiny diamonds falling down to wash this building clean. Arthur closed his eyes. Through Maya's description, a world appeared to him. It was not the world of dry blueprints or financial reports. It was a world with a soul, with color and rhythm. Maya's words were like brushstrokes painting directly onto his mind, clearing away the gray haze that enveloped him. Silvery purple. I never thought of it that way. My father used to say everyone has their own palette in their heart. You used too much gray and the yellow of money, so you forgot the color of the sky. Sam suddenly took Arthur's hand, his small hand warm and soft. Don't be sad, sir. I'll be your sentinel. Sister Maya will be your eyes. We are a team, aren't we? Arthur felt a powerful tremor in his chest. He realized he had something that money could not buy, the pure trust of two children he had tried to drive away. The ruthlessness and blind ambition he had long revered suddenly became meaningless. He no longer wanted to protect the spire because it was a multi-billion-dollar asset. He wanted to protect it because this was where Maya and Sam were taking refuge. He wanted to protect the future of these two children so they wouldn't have to sleep in utility closets or run from brutes like Gavin. Yes, Sam, we are a team. Arthur stood up, determination returning to his posture. Though his eyes were still dim, his resolve was clearer than ever. He began to plan the next steps. He knew Gavin would not give up. He was a pragmatist, and he would use every means to force Arthur to sign the transfer papers right here. Maya, listen to me. In this room there is a fire extinguisher and containers of chemical solvent used for thinning paint. I need your help to prepare something. You're going to confront them. There are so many of them. I won't confront them with brute force Maya. I will use his own greed to take him down. Sam, find me a roll of electrical tape on that shelf over there. We will ensure the brute out there regrets ever setting foot in this place. Arthur began instructing Maya on how to arrange the paint cans to create obstacles in the dark. He taught Sam how to maneuver through narrow gaps to create distracting sounds. In the darkness of the utility closet, 3 people were preparing for the final confrontation. Just then, a heavy impact rang out from the wooden door. The steel shelving unit blocking the door rattled violently. The sound of metal striking wood was dry and full of menace. I know you're in there, Arthur. Don't use those children as a shield for your failure. How long do you think you can hide? Gavin's voice rang out triumphant and contemptuous. He was right on the other side of the door. Arthur, listen to me. I know your vision is gone. You are now nothing more than a ruined man sitting on a pile of gold. Sign this and I'll call a helicopter to take you to the best hospital. Don't let those children suffer because of your obstinacy. Arthur signaled Maya and Sam to retreat behind the large paint cans. He stood tall, facing the door, though he only saw a blurry dark mass. Gavin, you always talk about failure. But tonight I realize who the real failure is. You snuck into my house, vandalized my property, and threatened defenseless children. You're not a businessman. You're just a scavenger in the dark. The striking on the door became more violent. A section of oak wood shattered, revealing a large gap. Gavin's flashlight beam shone directly into the utility closet, sweeping across Arthur's calm face. You're still talking tough. Let's see how long you can keep that tone when I finish off this room. Gavin slammed his shoulder into the door. The steel shelving unit began to shift. Maya tightly held Sam's hand. She had the fire extinguisher ready exactly as Arthur had planned. Arthur stood firm like a pillar in the room, his fists clenched, awaiting the portal's complete surrender. The confrontation on the 40th floor was no longer a struggle for assets. It had become a fight to protect what was truly valuable in a person's life. Arthur knew he was staking everything on these 2 children, and he felt he had never been richer than he was right now. The wooden door splintered with a loud crack, and the final iron latch flew onto the floor. Gavin kicked the door open, stepping in with a sinister smile, but he did not know that in the darkness of the utility closet, Arthur Sterling had already set a trap that no contract could nullify. He had just crossed the line, and Arthur was ready to close this final deal. The steel shelving unit clattered heavily to the floor. Gavin stepped over the wreckage, the flashlight in his hand, sweeping intensely across Arthur's face. Arthur stood straight, his broad shoulders obscuring the entrance to the room behind him. He sensed Maya and Sam holding their breath right behind his back. Maya, take Sam into the marble bathroom. Lock the door. Don't come out until I call your names. Arthur spoke without taking his eyes off the blurry light patch ahead. Maya grasped Sam's hand. She looked at Arthur one last time, then pulled her brother quickly inside. The metallic click of the bathroom door locking echoed. Arthur sighed in relief. He turned toward the approaching light. Look at you, Arthur, a king without sight standing amidst his collapsing castle. Don't you find that hilarious? Gavin stopped a few feet from Arthur. He spun the pry bar in his hand. The crew accompanying him fanned out their breath, reeking of smoke and sweat. I don't need sight to see your desperation, Gavin. You sneaked in here in the middle of a storm to vandalize my property. Is that the best a CEO like you can manage? Don't you lecture me tomorrow morning when the storm clears. I'll release the video of you going mad in an abandoned building with 2 homeless runaways. The board will kick you out of the chairman's seat immediately. You're blind, Arthur. A ruined man has no place at Sterling Corporation. Arthur gave a thin smirk. He leaned slightly against a column, his composure so complete that the workers around him began to exchange doubtful glances. He couldn't see them, but he clearly heard the shifting of their safety boots on the concrete floor. Did you think I came here unprepared? Gavin, you're always one step behind me. Listen, 38th floor, east side, your men broke 3 main water valves. 35th floor, the fiber optic cable system was completely severed. You even had people smash the imported Italian marble slabs in the main lobby. Gavin froze. He lowered his flashlight beam. How do you know you're blind? I designed this building. I know its slightest tremor. When the backup power system activated earlier, it didn't just turn on the emergency lights. It activated an independent security network I secretly installed for this penthouse area. The entire process of you and your men vandalizing has been recorded via infrared. You're lying. This building isn't even networked yet. Have you forgotten who I am? I own satellite telecommunications technology. All the data has been streamed directly to my private lawyer's server. If I don't log in to confirm safety by morning, all the evidence will be sent to the city police department. Felony vandalism and illegal trespassing are enough to put you away for 10 years. The workers behind Gavin began to murmur. One of them approached Gavin, his voice filled with worry. Hey boss, is he telling the truth? I don't want to go to jail for this small pay. Shut up, he's just deceiving you, he can't see a thing. Arthur took a step toward Gavin. Though his pace was cautious, his authority still made Gavin instinctively back away. I don't need to see you to drag you to the bottom of society, Gavin. You can seize the building, but you will never seize my mind. Now, if you all leave immediately, I might consider not submitting the evidence directly to the prosecutor. But if you take one more step toward that bathroom, I swear you will never see the light of day again. Gavin stared at Arthur. He saw no fear in the man before him. The decisiveness and logic in Arthur's words struck directly at a businessman's greatest fear, the collapse of reputation and freedom. You all heard him. Arthur continued, turning his head toward the workers, even without precisely locating them. You're just hired hands. Don't let your lives be destroyed by the greed of a man who is about to go bankrupt. The freight elevator in the back is still operating on backup power. Leave now, or tomorrow you will be the main characters on the crime news. The murmuring grew louder. The leader of the crew spat on the floor, then threw his iron bar down, creating a dry clang. I'm done. I'm not involved in this anymore. Let's go. Hey, stay right there. I paid you, Gavin yelled, but the crew had already begun to retreat toward the hallway. They weren't willing to gamble their lives and freedom against a tycoon who could mobilize a whole legion of lawyers. Their footsteps faded away, leaving Gavin isolated in the vast penthouse lobby. Gavin gasped for breath, resentment rising in his throat. He looked at Arthur, the man standing there holding an old satellite phone like a symbol of supreme power. He knew he had lost everything. If Arthur spoke the truth, Gavin's career would be in ruins. You think you've won, Arthur? You've lost your sight. You'll live your whole life in the dark. I may not see the light, Gavin, but I see the kindness you have never known. I see 2 children waiting for me in there. And you have nothing. Gavin let out a wild scream. He lunged at Arthur with the desperation of a cornered man. He wanted to seize the phone, intent on destroying the device that controlled his destiny. Hand that over, I will put an end to you right here. Arthur sensed the rush of air from Gavin's lunge. He moved to the side on instinct, but his failing sight caused him to collide with the edge of a stone counter. Arthur fell onto the floor. Gavin scrambled over his hand, gripping Arthur's collar tightly, raising the pry bar high. Let's see what you have to say from the grave. Arthur used his strong hands to lock onto Gavin's arm. The 2 men wrestled fiercely on the cold floor. Arthur felt Gavin's hot breath right next to his face. In this life-or-death moment, Arthur was not afraid for himself. He only worried about what would happen to Maya and Sam if he failed. Thud. The bathroom door burst open. Sam rushed out holding the high-powered flashlight, shining the intense beam directly into Gavin's face. Let go of Mr. Arthur. You brute. Gavin was suddenly blinded. He cried out and released his grip on Arthur's collar to shield his eyes. Seizing the opportunity, Arthur used all his strength to shove Gavin away. Gavin stumbled backward toward the floor-to-ceiling window, which was already cracked by the storm. Just then, a resounding sound pierced the dark atmosphere of the 40th floor. Woo! Woo! A series of sharp, deafening sirens wailed immediately below the building's windows. Streaks of blue and red light from dozens of special operations vehicles began sweeping continuously across the penthouse ceiling. The light was so powerful that it illuminated every speck of dust hanging in the air. Gavin froze his hands, still trembling. He looked down at the building lobby through the cracked glass. The special operations team had surged into the main entrance. Arthur sat up, fumbling to find Maya and Sam's hands. Maya ran to embrace him, while Sam continued to point the flashlight directly at Gavin like a true sentinel. It's over, Gavin. Arthur spoke, his voice ringing out amidst the rapidly approaching sirens. He felt Sam's small hand shaking but not letting go. Gavin looked out the window, then back at the 3 people huddled together. He dropped the pry bar onto the floor. The main penthouse door was breached once more, but this time it was not Gavin's crew. The special operations team flooded into the room, their gear at the ready. Arthur Sterling smiled, a faint look of relief. He felt the darkness in his eyes seem less cold as he sensed the warmth from the 2 children. He knew this game was not just about winners and losers. It had opened a path he had never dared to dream of. But as the officers rushed in to restrain Gavin, Arthur suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest, and he collapsed in Maya's arms. The boots of the special operations team hammered loudly on the stone floor. Gavin was pinned down, his hands restrained securely behind his back. He screamed about contracts, but no one paid attention. Arthur leaned against the wall, his breathing ragged. He couldn't see the chaos, but he clearly heard the distinct click of restraints. Mr. Sterling, medical personnel are on their way up. You need assistance immediately. The commanding officer approached, intending to help Arthur up. Arthur raised his hand, stopping him, his fingers tightening around Maya's slender hand. Beside them, Sam clung to his shirt, refusing to leave. A team from Child Protective Services entered, their eyes focused on the 2 children. We are here to take custody of the children. According to our files, they do not have legal guardians. Stay where you are. Arthur spoke, his voice weak, but still carrying the authority of a man accustomed to giving orders. He pulled out the satellite phone and dialed a preset speed dial. Attorney Smith, I'm in the penthouse. I need you to immediately initiate emergency guardianship proceedings. Their names are Maya and Sam. I'm staking my entire estate and my reputation as guarantee. I want them listed in the Sterling family registry before the sun sets. The social workers froze. They looked at each other, then at the man covered in dust, but radiating an unshakable determination. Mr. Sterling, this procedure is very complex. I don't pay you to tell me about complexity. Maya, Sam, you are not going anywhere. This is your home. Maya looked at Arthur, her tears falling onto his bruised hand. She never believed a stranger would stand up against the whole world to keep the two siblings together. "Mr. Arthur, do you really want to keep us? You can't even see our faces." "I don't need my eyes to see how brave you are, Maya. I have lived in this tower alone for too long. It's time this place had real life." Arthur turned to the officer and declared resolutely, "I am canceling the commercial center development. I will renovate this space. The spire dies tonight. Tomorrow it will be the Haven. This will be a sanctuary, a school, a home for children without recourse." Sam jumped up, hugging Arthur's neck. Arthur's eyes were now a complete still night, but he felt the warmth of the child's embrace. The darkness was no longer frightening, because he knew he belonged to something greater than money. The storm was over. The first light of dawn filtered through the cracked glass, splashing onto the penthouse lobby. "Maya, tell me, what does it look like outside?" Maya led Arthur to the windswept balcony. She looked toward the horizon where golden streaks of sunlight were tearing through the gray haze over Seattle. "The sky is honey orange, Mr. Arthur. The clouds are no longer tangled. They are thin like strips of white silk. The city below is glittering like a treasure chest just washed clean by the rain. And look, the first sunbeams are resting on Sam's shoulders." Arthur smiled, breathing in the fresh air. The scars from the loneliness and ruthlessness of his past seemed to be soothed by this sunlight. He took Maya and Sam's hands, leading them toward the elevator. "Let's go. We're going home." Sam's laughter echoed in the concrete hallway as the three stepped into the elevator. The cold real estate empire was left behind. Ahead of them was a true home where the light did not come from sight, but from hearts that had found each other in the storm of life. Sometimes we need to lose our sight to truly learn how to see. Arthur Sterling once had perfect vision, but was utterly blind to the suffering of his fellow man and his own isolation. He built a high tower to separate himself from the world, but in reality, he imprisoned himself in a jail of power and money. Conversely, when darkness enveloped his vision, Arthur saw the world at its brightest through the eyes of two orphaned children. He realized that a person's true legacy is not measured by the height of their buildings, but by the warmth of the hands they held in times of distress. The Haven is not just a roof for Maya and Sam. It is the salvation of Arthur's soul. It teaches us that the strongest fortress is not built with steel-reinforced concrete or marble, but with shared humanity. When you are willing to become a stronghold to shelter someone less fortunate, that is the moment you find the true meaning of existence. Note: the story above is entirely fictional. Character names, locations, and events were created for the purpose of illustrating an educational and artistic message. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental.